This session is going to look a little bit different. We're going to look more at the strategy behind how a real device testing cloud can really help enhance your business. So it's like more of the strategy that goes into how you want to organize the things that come together. With that, I want to make sure that we're all kind of on the same page as to some of the reasons why we've made the decisions that we've made. What are the market pressures that our customers tell us that they're feeling and having to respond to? How should you really think about your testing strategy, and how should that mitigate those pressures that are coming up, but also accelerate the kind of adoption and ultimate engagement from your developers and ultimately your customers as well? And then, of course, how can SaaS help you with that? Taking a look at both the experience that we have and, of course, building on the great functionality that my other three colleagues have already gone over as well, just to kind of help paint that picture of how we can really help you achieve the goals that you're looking for. Before we get into that, just like everybody else, just a tiny little bit about myself. So my name is Ryan Vesely. I am the VP of Global Technical Services here. And really what that means is I look after the technical sales teams primarily. So anybody who's customer facing that is technical, they're in my organization. And we work very, very closely with other organizations around implementation, customer success, even customer support, making sure that you have all of the technical knowledge that you need, whether it's during your evaluation or all the way through implementation and operational support, making sure you get those kinds of answers. I've been at SaaS for almost 5 years. Come December, it'll be 5 years for me. And previous to this, I actually came from the other side of the production line. I came from the monitoring space. So I spent some time at New Relic, spent some time at Salesforce, and I have different kinds of viewpoints of how we can attack this question of quality and making sure that all of our customers are in fact making the right and most well-informed decisions as they're getting ready to push their code to production, and ultimately what kind of information they're looking for to help make those kinds of decisions. I've been an SE, I've been a product manager, I've been a consultant, I've been an implementation. I've kind of done all of it when it comes down to how technology is put together. So I try to bring that kind of viewpoint into all the things that I'm talking about, because a lot of times the questions that come up really are how do I work together with other portions of our organization, and how do I make sure that we're getting the right kind of information over? So having that kind of perspective can help with that. And if I'm lucky and I'm not trapped in my garage with COVID or anything else, if I'm not working, I'm under the water. I absolutely love scuba diving. This is a picture actually of myself right above me. So I'm right here on the bottom left. Right above me is my son on his checkout dive, and across from me is my wife. And the reason why I wanted to kind of bring this up is that, believe it or not, actually relates to quality and the types of things that we're talking about. If you've ever gone into any kind of a diving experience, you know that tracking all of the various different metrics that you need not only help you have a better experience, but honestly, they can save your life. So looking at how much oxygen you have left, looking at how deep you are, really being aware of what the right things are that you need to track, and then doing the right kind of behaviors around that so that you can maximize your experience. That is something that is kind of at the very heart of everything that I do. And it's really interesting to see how there's a blend of that kind of approach, both in my personal life and professional side of things. So before we go any further, just a quick poll. Pilar, if we can go ahead and open that up, that's great. So which of the following best describes your real device testing infrastructure today? Do you maintain your own fleet of devices in your organization, and are they remote or are they hybrid? Are you having it all on-prem and people have to check in, check out, and make sure that they're scheduling those appropriately? Do you use a cloud already, or do you have both a hybrid solution of on-prem and cloud-based solutions that are available for your developers and your product managers and those folks? Go ahead and take a look at that, and feel free to enter your response, and then we can have that discussion following this one. Not surprisingly, there's a lot of different types of responses out there. What we find a lot of the times is people do try to find a way to make their devices available to all their developers in a home environment. So they keep them on-prem. They might have some hybrid approaches out there. Looks like that's definitely a big portion of this one. And then another one is just making sure that you're actually having the devices available for the developers as they go. Some of our customers have actually gone to the point of trying to manage those device libraries by shipping actual physical devices to individual developers. And they came to us because it just wasn't cost effective. And there were a lot of things about that were problematic. We'll get into some of those kinds of stories in a bit here, but it's interesting to see that there's kind of no definite one size fits all for all of this. And I think that really speaks to the concept that people are trying to do as much as they possibly can with what they have. And a lot of times they're trying to find a way to meet the needs of their developers from that standpoint. And ultimately, then the reason why they're doing that is because they're trying to respond to all these market pressures. This slide represents from July of last year up until August of 2022, just kind of a quick view of all the various different things that developers have to deal with, whether it's new devices that are being released by manufacturers, or it's new browser versions or new OS versions, new frameworks that are being introduced, new versions of frameworks that are being introduced, lots of different things that are constantly being innovated on. And whenever that happens, of course, there's sometimes those security incidents that cause problems as well. So there's just a ton of things that you have to react to. And if it's one organization that's trying to do it all, it can become, frankly, just unsustainable. To have the level of cost available that you can then go ahead and provide this kind of environment to all of your developers, it can become really, really costly and just not something that you can keep going forward with. Well, the reason why that's the case is because there are these trends that are happening in the market that are actually impacting the way that companies think about software and how they develop their software and release it to production. First and foremost, without a doubt, users are constantly demanding the best possible experience, perfection, right? They want to be able to load up an app on their mobile device, be able to do what they want to do, whether it's buying something or reading something or watching something, and then be able to continue that process on, possibly even switching from one device to another. So I might start on my commute and I'm looking at maybe a Netflix show or something like that, and I don't finish it, and then I want to flip over when I get home to watch it on the big screen at home. I want to be able to have that experience be seamless because I'm a consumer of that, and I don't want to waste time trying to figure out where I was left off. So my expectations are that my experience on my mobile device is not only transferable, but it's perfect. Well, that's really, really hard to maintain. Developers are not only focusing on innovating new functionalities within their software, but just maintaining the quality expectations of all the customers that are there, whether that's responding to issues that may have arisen in production, or it's external pressures that are coming in, like, for example, a security breach that might be there. Having that kind of an approach ultimately really constrains the way that developers can focus their time. And on top of that, they've got the product managers constantly pressuring them to release code faster, to get the product to market as fast as they can, either to respond to a competition that's already out innovating them, or it's that they've got this great idea that they want to get out there and have their users experience it. So there's that constant pressure. And oftentimes what ends up happening is because they don't have access to test the various different devices that they want to, they resort to having to take advantage of whatever they can. So it might be a limited set of devices that are available in a local environment, or it could be that they have to share those devices with a bunch of other developers, and they find that not only is it causing them to slow down releasing a production, but it actually stymies innovation. They're not able to get things out as fast as they want into production alone, and they're not able to change things or introduce new functionalities the way that they want to because of this great bottleneck. I'm sure this is something that we've all seen before, but really what this is ultimately showing us is that there's an increased interest in understanding how developers are thinking about software when it comes to the way that they intend the software to work and the way that it actually behaves. Now, this is a concept that I want you to think about the rest of this session, because we're going to find that it actually permeates everything we're talking about. The easiest one to think about is the intention of the design. Wim talked about it earlier about product design and UI design of, I have an intention of walking on that paved path. But the behavior is that they're actually cutting the corner, right? It's faster, it's easier. So they're not necessarily actually designing the application correctly based on the user behavior, or potentially the behavior is just changing it. And so you have to maintain that concept of understanding what the behavior of the user is, what the intention of it is, and ultimately how the application is responding to that. That could be anything from performance, it could be availability, it could be functional working. Lots of different aspects of that behavior really come into play, and you need to measure all of that. There are other things to think about when you are considering intention and behavior. It's not just the application, but it's also just the way that you want to engage with your customers. You intend for them to be able to do the various different things that you're looking for. Start a purchase process on your mobile device and complete it on a website, or start any other process that you're thinking about, whether it's a business process or a personal process. Have that ubiquity across various different devices and ensuring that it's perfect, that it's meeting the perfection expectations of what your users have. And then, of course, through that intention, you are actually starting to shape the behavior of your users as well, and making sure that they're having that process put together. Well, as you're doing that, you're also having an intention of the way that your developers work and the behavior that they have. Do they have clean code? Do they check in the right way? Are they collaborating appropriately? Do they share what they're finding across the board? And are they talking to each other? Or are you still working in silos? This concept of intention and behavior permeates everything we do when it comes to software quality and ultimately the delivery of software. It's why we've made the acquisitions that we've made. It's why we've introduced a variety of different touch points, whether it's APIs, or the errors and crashes that are happening on the mobile side of things, or even engaging with beta management and getting actual pre-production exposure to customers and users to help you make those right kinds of decisions. Intention and behavior permeates everything that we have. And just think about that as you go through the rest of this presentation and as you're thinking about all the other presentations, because it really does affect how we actually achieve that level of perfection. Okay, so one more quick break here. One quick poll. Which of the following market pressures that we've already gone over are you feeling the most? Is it that you've got local testing on physical devices and that it's stymieing the collaboration and innovation that you're looking for? Do you find that the developers are constrained, that they have to constantly be thinking about not just innovating, but ensuring that the right kind of quality steps are there and the right kind of frameworks are set up and the right kind of devices are set up? Do you find that getting to market is the constant threat that you have and that you're dealing with, whether it's from competition or it's your strategy of your organization and just the need to get to production as fast as possible? Or is it frankly just that you've got a lot of users giving you feedback that might be detracting from your overall reputation, you're losing revenue because of it, or other types of things? Is it the users that are really causing you the most amount of response that you're looking for? Go ahead and take a look at that and think about it, and then let's take a look at your responses here in a bit. So what we're seeing then is that there's a pretty wide spread. Actually, I'm surprised that the users is the lowest amount. So a lot of times when customers are coming to us and talking about how can we help them achieve excellence in their testing strategy, it's because there's a lot of negative reviews either on the mobile app, or there's a lot of support tickets, or they're responding to things on Twitter that are out there. So it's actually interesting to see that that's actually the lowest amount. The biggest one here, obviously, is not terribly surprising, is just the need to get to market as fast as possible. Pushing code to production and making sure that you have service and return to service is a critical factor of what we're looking at here. And if you go back to my time at New Relic that I mentioned at the very beginning, that's kind of the other side of the coin, is reacting to an issue that's already happened and then fixing it. that approach is sound and it has its definite merits, but at the same time, it's already somewhat too late. You've already impacted users. So thinking about it from a point of view of a more holistic approach, what is the intention that you have for your code to work, and how is it actually behaving in production, and how are your users engaging with it? Having that opinion and informed decision before you get to production can actually really help ensure that you're having the right kind of experience presented to your users. The constrained developers, obviously, that's another big one. So there's a good spread here to see how this comes into play. And I think that we'll find that it's relevant for the rest of this session as well. So if those are all the things that are happening right now, those are the pressures that you're feeling, why change? And why change now? Like, what else could be helping you make that decision? And ultimately, I think Christian had talked about this, as did Mike, and frankly, actually all three of them, Wim did as well, is that the bad experience that's out there, it's incredibly costly. It's costly on the customer experience. Again, thinking about, are you losing users? Are you having attrition of people that are not coming back and either subscribing or doing the right kind of processes that you're thinking of? Are they finding alternate ways, and are they moving on to your competition? More importantly on that side of things is maybe not just that one user, but is your reputation starting to get impacted by this? Do you need to be thinking about the way that you're pushing code to production and the quality that you're creating a little bit differently than what you've been doing in the past? On the flip side, there's another impact on that, and that's the developer experience. So developers, man, they love to create. They love to actually get code out there that works and is trusted and has it pushed to production as fast as possible. If you don't have the tools available for them to actually have that flexibility, then either they're going to go out and find their own, which means that now you've got a problem of consistency. Every developer's doing their own thing. Or they'll leave and they'll go to an organization where they actually have those tools available. So obviously the war on talent is something that's always going to be the case. No one ever is going to be not thinking about how to retain the best possible talent they can, and ensuring that you have the right kind of experience and tools available for your developers can help with that. But it obviously also helps with making sure that people are as productive as they possibly can be. They are more confident in their own code. Therefore, your organization is more confident in the way that they interact with their customers. And it just builds trust all around. And if you're not able to do that, if you have consistent bad experiences, that can really damage the way that you have both your experience with your customers and frankly, your developers as well. So let's take a look also at more of the numbers behind all of this. If we assume just for a second that you're dealing with 100 developers and QA folks out there, and each one of them wants to have access to roughly 10 devices at any given time, and each device by today's standards is around $800 per device, you're looking at, just to buy those devices for all of your users, around $800,000 per year. But the problem is it's not just buying the device themselves. Studies have shown that it's actually between 3 and 5% higher of a cost to not only acquire the device, but to integrate it, to maintain it, to have the right kind of testing solution on top of it so that you have the right kind of interactions, all the various different things that go into that. And some things to think about there then are, how do you actually manage that? How do you think about the way that you're procuring those devices? You've got not only the cost to buy it, but you've got shipping to make sure that it gets from the distributor to your data center. You've got insurance on that. So a lot of times customers will tell us that their biggest concern is either a device that was acquired goes missing or arrives broken. Especially if you're sharing between developers, one developer shipping it to another, that can go really, really poorly on that side of things. Other things to be thinking about is, how often are you thinking about maintaining the OS updates? Do you need to make sure that you have a wide variety of options to play with on that side and ensure that your developers have that aspect? What happens if somebody forgets to charge it and it's no longer available? Do you have backups from that side of things? Are there security risks, physically or logically, that you have to worry about? Because that can play a factor into it. So there's a lot more that goes into maintaining a device library than just acquiring the device. It's ensuring it's safe, it's protected, it's usable, and it's available. So all of those things have a factor into, again, those two things around customer experience and developer experience. And keep in mind, it also goes back into that concept of intention and behaviors. We actually had a customer tell us once that the reason why they chose to move over to us is because they had too many times heard from their developers that they either had lent it to a different developer and they no longer had access to it, or they literally forgot to recharge the device overnight, so they had to wait until that was done. That's costing them time. Trusting your developers to think through all of these things when really you want them focusing in on developing code, testing it, and getting it to production. It's too much for one person to think about. So that's why they decided to shift over to us. On top of that, there's the concept of making sure that things are not only available, but that it's to scale. Having one device per developer that represents an iOS environment, that's great. They can test on that one device. But are they able to test on all the various different devices that the users are using out there in the wild? Do you have a good representation of what the user base is, whether it's device or OS or browsers or other types of things? Do you have not only the relevant aspect of scalability from that point of view, but can you then trickle that down and get to a high degree of parallelism? So you're ensuring that the code that you're having catches as many of those bugs as fast as you can, as opposed to just having to repeat it over and over and over again on one single device. So there's lots of things that go into how you want to think about maintaining that library internally versus potentially letting somebody else handle that. And that's really where SOS can help you. So some of the things to think about there are, we really want to focus your organization into understanding how you can achieve value faster by using SOS Labs in the Real Device Cloud. So we've already talked about the customer experience a bit. So that one's relatively, hopefully easy at this point, that you can maximize the coverage you're having. You're showing and testing against what represents the vast majority of your user base out there. How are you ensuring that you have an understanding of what their actual behavior in the wild looks like, as well as potentially what you expect them to be doing? What's the intention that you want to have tested against? And then using things like the error reporting and logging to understand what that looks like in the wild, or even looking at it from a beta management side of things. Pulling those things together can help with that. The costs, we talked about that one a little bit as well. Thinking about procuring the costs or procuring the devices, certainly a big thing. We've obviously are releasing devices from the various different manufacturers multiple times, potentially a year, and wanting to update that and have the most available devices that are out there. But again, it goes into not just the actual purchase of the device, it's how do you insure it? How do you ship it? How do you integrate it? All these things factor into that side of things as well. On the flip side, thinking about the developer experience, then you want to ensure truly that you can test from anywhere, anytime, on any given device. That's really what it boils down to. A developer wants to have the absolute confidence that the code that they've created works everywhere, every single time. And frankly, the only way that you can economically achieve that is to get it to a scale where you have a lot of different possible devices that you can play with, and not maybe just settling for one or two devices that are available at any given time per developer. And then finally, again, that aspect of security and compliance. There's a lot of times when having a local library sounds good, but I've seen a lot of examples from real customers where they've sent me pictures of their data center, which is frankly just a bunch of tablets laying on top of a table. Well, all it takes is one person to accidentally bump that table and they all go falling to the floor. They might become unplugged. They might break. You may have to replace them. They're just not secure. So don't think of security strictly as things like identity management and making sure that data isn't compromised, which is of course important, but it's not the only aspect of security. There's physical security as well, making sure that things are done predictably, that you have the available devices that are there, and they're not just kind of exposed to anybody for potential accidents that might happen. So I mentioned before that obviously manufacturers are releasing devices frequently. SOS is actually really dedicated to making sure that we keep up with all of them as fast as we possibly can. We're the first in the market to support iOS 16 and the iPhone 14 series on day zero, meaning the day that it was released, it was available. So you could actually use it the day that it was there. We've ensured, working with the manufacturers, that we have advanced access to those to ensure that they're worked into our data center so that you can then take advantage of them before really you start getting those issues coming in from users saying, hey, the app isn't working on my new phone. All of that ultimately is done in a way to ensure that the users of your application have the best possible experience available to them. And the way that we do that is be providing the right kind of testing environment for your solution. We've talked a lot about how you want to think about not just the devices, but potentially the emulators and simulators side of things, and integrating the various different viewpoints of how those all come together. Think about, again, that concept of intention and behavior. Your designers, your developers, they have an intention of the way that the application should work. How is it actually behaving in production? How are your users behaving when they're integrated or when they're interacting with it? That's where beta management can really help you get a good handle on what's actually happening out there. Do they use the features you expect them to use, or are they not using it? And if they're not using it, are they giving you the relevant information to help you make better informed decisions and get production code out there that not only works, but is enticing and people want to use it? It's a big factor into thinking about all of that concepts of ensuring quality is there. Quality is not just about functionality. It's about engagement. It's about making sure that users want to use the tools that you provide, and ultimately making some decisions to help you go down the path to increase that kind of engagement. And then obviously doing the right kind of things in terms of, once it's in production, how do you ensure that you're tracking what's actually happening in the wild, responding to it, and getting it resolved as fast as possible? The concepts, of course, that I'm talking about there are things like MTTR, mean time to resolution, or MTTI, mean time to isolation. How do you find the problem? How do you rectify it? How do you return to service as fast as you can, by taking a consideration of how it was designed, what kind of feedback you have during your beta management, what kinds of decisions you're making about that, how fast you're getting to production, and then what types of behaviors are you seeing in production, to not only help inform the decisions you have to make about how to correct things, but then how do you close that loop? How do you go back and make sure that your developers are having the right viewpoint and behaviors of their own as they develop code to push that forward? The only way that you can really do that is to offload a lot of the worry that they have around, do I have the environments to test? Do I have all the things that I want to accomplish? And that's where really Sauce Labs can help you. Mike has already shown you this slide, so it's a bit of a repeat, but it is something to consider in terms of how all of these things fit together. When Sauce was first founded, we really only looked at it from a point of view of functionality testing. We had, of course, support for Selenium and Appium, and taking a look at how those things come together. But over time, we've added a wide degree of functionality to not only help you find the issues throughout your software development lifecycle and where those things are appearing, but how they all interact together. Thinking about API tests, and are you having the right kind of service availability from that standpoint? Thinking about visual, and are you ensuring that the right types of things are not only appearing correctly, but are the right things appearing? Do you have localization questions? Do you have language questions that are factoring into that? We talked a lot about how all of the user journey monitoring factors into this, and are the users behaving the way that you expect them to? And how do error reporting and monitoring factor into these types of things? All of this is ultimately designed to work together, and we will continue to innovate on that and make it as seamless as possible for users to experience this. Kareem's demo that we saw earlier showed a really good example of how those things come together, whether it's from an API or network logs, or even taking a look at interactions or errors. All of those things in one unified view is what we're aiming to provide to our customers as well. So we really look forward to working with you. We hope that this is something that is enticing and interesting for you to consider as we go through it. And ultimately, we do believe that that question of intention and behavior, as you're thinking about how all of these things come together, either your application, your users, or even your own developers, how do you have the right kind of strategy to support that? And ultimately, how does that impact your business from a cost mitigation standpoint, from a talent retention standpoint, from a customer retention standpoint, and ultimately a brand and trust standpoint? All of these factor into it, and we want to help you get there. I think at this point, I'm going to leave it at that. And Ashwini, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Ryan. I'm sure our attendees have learned a lot about the benefits of choosing a secure and reliable cloud for their real device testing. We did get a lot of questions, which we have answered along the way.
Thank
I
you.
do have two questions for you, Ryan, and hopefully
Sure.
you can throw some light on that. So first one is around, can you highlight some specific benefits of choosing private devices?
Sure, absolutely. So embedded in that question is what's the difference between public devices and private devices? So private devices are your own devices, right? You are the only one that would have access to them. You can do things like preserving environment startup so that if you don't want to reload the application every single time, we can make sure that that's preserved from that point. Of course, there's going to be a cleaning process with that so that you return it to a state where it's trusted and you're starting from a reasonably clean area, depending on what you want to go with that, if you're preserving that environment. On a public side of things, it's a shared device. It's something that one is not a guaranteed available device. So if it's a shared pool, anybody out there can have access to it. Again, there's a cleaning environment or cleaning process on that to make sure that it's returned to a pristine environment, but you're not going to be able to do things like preserve environments. Like you're not going to be able to not have to reload your application every single time. Ultimately, what we found is that if the question that you're really trying to solve for is a breadth question, if you're looking at it from a point of view of we don't really necessarily know what our users are working from, or we want to have a really wide degree of breadth of coverage, then our recommendation is to go to public. But if you're looking at it from a point of view of we're very confident that 80 to 90% of our customers are using these 10 devices, these 20 devices, whatever it might be, then that's where you want to really hone in and go for private, because that's where you can ensure that they are always available, that you're going to have a higher degree of parallelism because they're your devices. You have that access to it. You're not sharing them with anybody else. And ultimately, along with that, then you can get to a higher degree of consistency because you're always having those devices available from that standpoint.
That makes sense. As security is also top of mind for everyone, can you provide some guidance with respect to the security aspects that Sauce Labs Real Device Cloud provides?
Sure, of course. So when you're thinking about accessing those, we kind of already addressed that a little bit, the concept of private devices versus public. So if it's private, it's only your device. You have complete control over what's installed on it, and you're not sharing that with anybody else. So that's the first line of defense right there. Other types of things that we have available are tools that enable you to open tunnels to Sauce in a private environment, a proxy, if you will. We call it Sauce Connect. It gives you a great degree of control over not only how you connect, but what types of ports you're using, the protocols, all those types of things to make sure that you have the complete and total control over that. So you're not getting any kind of injections of traffic that would potentially pose a threat from that point of view. And then again, the last thing that I would mention on that is what I had already talked about, which is that concept of a cleaning process. So at the end of every single test, we run that cleaning process, which completely wipes out all the data. It cleans all the various different user IDs and account information. It cleans out anything that was already installed and ultimately returns that back to a pristine state so you can start from a trusted environment. If there are other security questions that go deeper than that, we're happy to have a conversation with you about that. We can bring in a security expert from our side. And we've also published a bunch of different white papers on security as well that we can provide for you.
Yes, we can definitely share the resources that we have already created around this. So with that, we're almost at the end of our event today. It's been almost close to 2.5 hours now. So thank you for staying with us. For the next 10 to 15 minutes, we can do a final Q&A. So if you didn't get a chance to post your questions earlier today for any of the speakers, please do so now in the Q&A box. Meanwhile, we can take up some questions that had already come in. And this first one actually ties really well into the theme of today's event. And it's around what specific market trends are we seeing today that will drive the future of mobile app development and testing? I believe, Mike, you can also take this one if you'd like.
Look, I think that we mentioned that it's kind of sprinkled throughout a lot of the talks today. And I think some of the trends around new frameworks that are being adopted to build mobile applications we continue to see new frameworks pop up, whether that's the adoption of Flutter, React Native, and as well as, but still a lot of use of mobile native frameworks as well. And I think that those complications, there's complications that arise because of different frameworks being adopted and how that changes your testing strategy. I know we had a comment about Jetpack as well, and some of the complications between getting Jetpack and Appium to work. So I think that those trends around getting the different tech stacks it continues to be a complicated space. And then I think that the other trend that I'd say maybe more on the ways in which we are breaking down silos in development teams, where user feedback, and this was, we talked about this earlier, but even breaking down the silos between, the development team and maybe the end user, so that you're constantly getting that feedback early in the process to validate what you're building. We see that, I see that trend only continuing to where getting the developer really right next to their user is how you speed up development. So in whatever way that ends up happening, whether that's actually sitting next to your user or just getting feedback throughout the beta testing phase or the development phase or even in production.
Yes, thank you, Mike, for that answer. There's one more question around, do you have any recommendations on resources, websites where developers and testers can go to and learn more about the mobile testing trends, practices, and be really up to date? So I believe Wim, Mike, Ryan, you all are free to jump in on this one.
Yeah, I think Wim here. Can you mute yours? We got a large echo here. Sorry, Mike, we're in the same room. Sorry, everybody. I think if you would look at kind of like the mobile trends, first of all, what I would just advise everybody to do is look, first of all, into all the documentation that comes out for new releases of the OSs. That will give you a good idea what might be coming. Checking out beta versions would already help you figure out what you might need to do or change in your automation strategy. So looking at the documentation release notes from the beta releases would already help. Then, first of all, checking out, for example, questions on the Appium channel that might even also help you understand how to solve certain challenges when you need to automate something. And yeah, trying to also, what I normally do is try to follow a few developers. I'm a big fan of React Native. So what I normally do is I follow those guys or on Twitter or on LinkedIn, because then you will also get more information about what might change in the coming releases, and you might want to think about or already try to solve the challenges that you might get with those new releases. And then there are multiple Reddit channels. For iOS, you've got the Mac rumor that might also give you more understanding what might be coming. That could help you, kind of like be aware. How do you say it? Be ahead of what you might face in the near future with new releases. I don't know, Ryan, if you also have some recommendations.
I was going to recommend also just the simple Sauce blog. I mean, we're constantly posting blogs that are written from the developer's point of view, from a practitioner's point of view. There's a lot of resources that you can find on that side of things, and likewise, there's a bunch of different communities out there as well. I know that the Sauce community is something that we are looking to continually innovate on. So if that's something that you have opinions on, we would invite you to take part of that. So it's not just about necessarily reading and learning from other people, but help the conversation, right? And inject your own opinion on that as well. We would welcome that kind of interaction.
Wonderful. And Ryan, you really brought up an important point around community. So we would really love any opinions you've got and, any suggestions you've got on how we can really, offer that to you so that everybody can share their best practices and really learn from each other. So with that, that's all we've got for today. On behalf of Sauce Labs, we'd like to thank you all for your attendance and participation. It's been an amazing 2.5 hours of learning. I also want to do a small plug in here. Next month, we are hosting our Testing for Good workshops. It will happen from October 18th to the 20th. And it's basically a free virtual event. It's dedicated to training the world in the automation skills while giving back to the community. So we'll be posting a link in the chat. So if you're interested, do register for that. And we'll see you next time. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.